Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Global Water Futures Annual Open Science Meeting, themed Knowledge to Action. I'm Corinne Schuster-Wallace. I'm Associate Director of Global Water Futures, and I'm participating from Saskatoon, Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis. And we're gathered virtually today from across Canada, but also internationally. And so we recognize the First Peoples of these places who for generations have stewarded the lands and waters that we depend on for our health, but also for our overall well-being. It's my great pleasure this morning to introduce Elder Duquette and request that he opens this meeting in a good way, that this meeting catalyzes conversations and forges new partnerships as we continue to generate knowledge to inform equitable and sustainable action. So, Elder Duquette, the floor is yours.
Hi. Itamaka kyogatam skatna o tan taskina. Kutosik pahamatun aski togmana. Tigyut naskia nistanan. Motiut naskia maikim iki asik tigiwikia iki apachita homaski. Yoka kyobanganto tamik uti ubiti kasti wehkomgawik kamam skutami goma pi. Tansi tagiti, tansimini is suatami, tansimini sapachita, kichinats, kiano, paisino ke etmomuya tasimini go puchamet wawani chigia hitu nanto tinigan, nawe minuti. Muy siapata. Naga kakui mamo paya, kamamo wichito ya kigno kigoya. Kung mino masagi pagaw pisimo o kautita, kung mino istekto etoskatwea, iwo tsaka kiwe pupiki, wami apata. I want to just say good morning and good day to everyone that's online. Today I just acknowledged my territory as the Treaty 6 territory in my language, my first language, which I acknowledge every day, every morning when I wake up, talking to Creator in a blessed way that He will honor us, and we honor Him as well in turn, that He will hear us. For the things that are going to be discussed throughout the 3-day session, it's important to realize, first of all, as individuals, as one, when you wake up and then you think or you feel, what a miracle happening again, that I am up. Like you wrestle the water and it wakes up and it has movement. And that's how we are in our system, in our bodies. So we honor that. Without that sacred water, we cannot survive. And I welcome the worldview as well, because that's one of the things that we do every morning here, is we drink that glass of water to sustain us. Even though we don't take any food, even that itself is number one, we say, in our culture. When you base that grounding belief, you look around and you see the movement of water, how it's not dormant, because it's communicating with the land as it flows. It's communicating with the animals when the animals, when they land on the water, or when they drink from the ground to go and have a drink of water. Everything has a message. They are waiting, to give back to that animal, to the animals, the birds, the insects, the plants. And today I honor the month of May. We honor every month. Like today, The moon is the leaf budding moon. And we realize that, it's come alive again. It was sleeping. It was not dead. It was sleeping. When the leaves come out, that's when they give out that oxygen, that energy that we feel when it's rustling, like they're singing to us. Wake up, listen to me. The grass as well, when you walk on it. So there's that total connection of water, 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 water. When each step you take, it's moving in your system, in your body. It's circulating. It's cleansing. It's cleansing. So to realize that, we have to in turn look at the water sources around us. What is it that we have to do to protect that? What do we have to do? How do we have to connect? How do we have to talk with the governments? Talk with the local, government even, how they distribute the water. We're paying for the water now, but yet, we don't complain about that. We say, it's a need. But it's beyond that, more spiritual sense of awareness of that water. It's a healer, It's a cleanser. It's so immense, that we are a big part of that process of how it sets a tone to our thinking. So today, that's my blessing I give to everyone, wherever you are, because it has a standard of like a pillar, It's hard to define, but it's more because it's too spiritual to start dissecting it and defining it in a way where to break it down and say this piece belongs. No, it belongs to one, to you. It belongs to you, but it's extended over to your loved ones with the energy. So that's my message today. The water is our life giver. In our culture, the women are life givers, the water keepers, the fire keepers. That's why we have to go back to that matriarchal system, and our women to help us understand us as men. So don't lose sight of that, that flow when you look at the water flowing, because it can turn around without you knowing the currents. They have their own water system, water routes. That's for a purpose of that as well. That's what we learned as little children when we were taught by our grandparents. They used to take us to the water, to the shore, to the water, and then we looked in the water, how clear it was, and say, you see it moving, which way is it going? It's going this way when you look from the top, but I see that it's going the other way as well. How intelligent they were, So I thank you with that, and that'd be my blessing again. So I'll leave you with that, and welcome to our territory. It's a beautiful place. We all say that, everywhere you are, it's a beautiful place. Kasama kabagatam skat na nanas na omin into tawi hai kitama muistat.
Hi. Thank you, Elder Duquette, for your words of wisdom and for reminding all of us of the importance of water, not just for us as people, but the land, the animals, and our need to respect and protect our water resources. This is really appropriate today when we're talking about managing and governing our water resources. I would like to now hand the floor over to Dr. Baljit Singh, Vice President Research at the University of Saskatchewan and Principal Investigator for the Global Water Futures, for his introductory remarks. Dr. Singh. Dr. Singh, you're muted.
I just said the most profound thoughts I have to repeat now. So great. Thank you very much, Corinne. I really appreciate this opportunity to be with all of you. And I hope very soon we will be together in person. Whenever I get to spend some time or be in the company of our elder Duquette, it always is an opportunity to learn the way we look at the environment around us. The way we look at the environment, the way the communities, people looked at the land, the water, the air before we turned them into commodities and utilities. That deeper thought is something that we hope and we continue to learn from elders such as Duquette and other members of the First Nations communities. The land on which we live is the land that has been here from time immemorial, and many people have lived on this land before the new people arrived over the last 2-3 centuries. So looking after the land with those older perspectives in our mind, taking care of the resources that nature has given to us, is one of the ways to really connect back to the knowledge from the First Nations communities. And the vehicle for us is our elders like Duquette, and to work with them. And we do work with elder in many other settings, and I really appreciate, I'm thankful, I'm grateful for the time and opportunities that we get to be with him. The water is a part of every old civilization, and I was reflecting while elder was speaking that in my culture and religion, one of the lines which we are taught from our childhood, and its part is in the book that Sikhs look up to for philosophy and for way of living, is that the water is the first thing that brings life to everyone, plants, animals, and humans. And so the water is something we respect, we value, we worship, and we use very carefully. And that's where the role of researchers who are gathered around Global Waters Futures program becomes so meaningful, so valuable, as to considering today's pressures on the water. Canada on surface is blessed with abundance of water everywhere. And there are lots of lakes, there are glaciers, and there are rivers that provide us resources to live our life, do our commodities, grow our food, and really underpin the economic enterprise and the prosperity of our country. But as you all have been calling upon the policymakers and our citizens that this is a resource which we need to steward very well if we are going to have it with us for many, many generations to come. You all have alerted us to the occurrence of the droughts and the floods and the wildfires, which are really, again, circle around the water as a resource, and how do we use it, how do we consume it, and how do we make sure that it is sustained over a period of time. University of Saskatchewan has a really distinguished history of conducting research in the area of hydrology, fresh water, and things related to the engineering piece around water. And it's built on that foundation that our national collaboration with McMaster, with Wilfrid Laurier and Waterloo and many other universities in Canada and abroad has really created this program, which is very impactful and is showing us the way forward through data, through evidence, and also training of the next generation of researchers that will continue to work on water. And it's very heartening to see that how the science which you are creating is beginning to influence the public policy. Whether it is the setting up of the Canada Water Agency, or whether it is the federal government talking to you to get the latest data, the models, so that we can continue to do a better forecasting of the water availability in our country. And overall, it underpins the area of the water security, the signature area at University of Saskatchewan, because that does not come out of the blue. It's built on decades-long history of science and education in this area. When I look at the global situation, I was in Bangladesh last week because our Global Institute for Water Security has a regional office there. Again, despite that small country being surrounded by water and at the mouth of a delta, they are still worried about their water security. The salinity of the land is really eating away the arable land. That, of course, impacts the food production. That, of course, impacts the food security of a country with a rapidly growing population. So the work that you do, the models that you develop, are going to really showcase Canada's willingness to participate in solving grand challenges around food production, food security, water security, and the climate change put together. So therefore, I remain very proud of the work that you do, and I'm really grateful to the leadership of my colleagues from McMaster, Waterloo, and Wilfrid Laurier in really providing strong support to this particular Canada First Excellence Research Fund and taking it forward. I hope this program will continue, and certainly I will leave no stone unturned to provide support to this program so that this program continues to provide the way forward when it comes to securing our water resources. So I close by thanking all of you. I'm grateful to the science and the work that you do, sometimes very demanding and in very demanding situations. And I am grateful to Elder Duquette for sharing the wisdom from the Indigenous perspective. I'm sure you find that very helpful as you look at the water with a new lens, with a new perspective. Thank you so very much, Dr. Schuster-Wallace, for this opportunity, and I turn it over to you now.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. Your emphasis on our role as stewards for and educators of future generations is a really important reminder of why our work is so important. So thank you for your kind remarks. I'm sure that the next speaker needs no introduction, but for those of you who do not know Dr. John Pomeroy, he is Director of Global Water Futures Program and will be sharing an overview of the Global Water Futures to date. John, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Corinne, and welcome from Treaty 7 territory in Canmore, Alberta, and the home of the Métis in this region. I was reflecting on remarks from Elder Duquette and Vice President of Research Singh on the importance of water, and this Global Water Futures program has been an absolute delight to be engaged in because we've had such tremendous impact across the country. And I've seen how water resonates with Canadians from all walks of life and in so many ways. I'm going to show you a few slides, and as I figure out the system here, so give me a quick second. And here we go. I will allow. All right, and all right, so hopefully you can see that slide. Shout at me, someone, if not. Great. So we'll do an assessment of global water futures in 2022, and I want to recognize Corinne Schuster-Wallace, marvelous Associate Director for Global Water Futures Program and chairing this meeting. So what do we have to say about Global Water Futures? You know it's a partnership of Saskatchewan, Waterloo, McMaster, and Laurier at its core, but 14 other universities across Canada as well. It's truly a coast-to-coast approach to water in Canada with substantial funding from the Canada First Research Excellence Fund. What is our mission? Our mission is to improve capability for water-related disaster warnings, to diagnose and predict water futures and future impacts on society and ecosystems, and to develop new models, tools, and approaches for managing water-related risks, whether it's associated with adaptation to climate and land use changes and other changes, or managing risks for communities and regions. We are based upon 3 science pillars. The first pillar is very scientific, an approach at diagnosing and predicting change in cold regions. The second one, a bit more operational, developing big data and decision support systems to better catalog and predict water. And the third is working with societies at multiple levels, designing solutions for user problems and working with users to do this. It's a transdisciplinary research program where I have been working with hundreds of users from the beginning of the program and continue to as we help prepare Canada for its future water conditions in a time of rapid climate change. The program has grown massively since we began in 2016. I'm happy to say we're up to 64 projects and core teams, and we just added the Rayon project. So I guess that's 65 projects if we include the affiliated ones. 18 universities are funded under this project, over 200 faculty investigators with funding across Canada, almost 500 partners, almost 1,000 publications. These are stats that we collected last year. So with this year's reporting, we'll have updates. Over 2,300 presentations, now well over 4,000 media stories. Mark Ferguson reports that 1 billion people have been exposed to global water futures around the world at some point in the media. And a tremendous resource of humans across Canada working under the program. About 1,200 researchers have been hired, many students, graduate students, postdoctoral fellows, researchers, technicians, visiting fellows, specialized faculty at the university. So it's absolutely incredible. And our budget in excess of $300 million from the original core funding from CFRF of $77.8 million, working with partners and with in-kind contributions, and from tri-agency funds and provincial funds, so we've been able to take it up over 300 million. So that's a credit to everyone involved in the program. We tie in globally very, very strongly. We are the only North American regional hydroclimate project of the World Climate Research Program's GWEX project. We are developing very strong linkages and have them with the World Meteorological Organization and with UNESCO through its international intergovernmental hydrological program. And we are a water futures component of the Future Earth project, so a strong tie-in there. We have as our core teams an integrated water observation, data prediction, and knowledge mobilization strategy that ties in strongly to our communications team. So water predictions across major river basins across Canada, you see mapped out there. The dozens of observatories across Canada, well, 76 right now, and core laboratories in our universities, but also in remote locations. And to be envied data management system is absolutely brilliant. And then the most sophisticated and developed water modeling system in Canada through our core modeling and prediction team, and one that has increasing recognition around the world, both the United States and globally. Our planetary water prediction initiative is how we take what we learn in Canada from global water futures to the world. Strong linkages in high mountain Asia, in the Andes, throughout Europe. We actually have connections and activities in all continents that are inhabited. So it's and tremendous advances right now going on in South and Central Asia and the Andes in our modeling, and throughout North America, including strong collaborations that you'll see of the many groups that are noted here. I won't run through them all. Our projects are the engine, the core of Global Water Futures, and that's where the innovation comes from. In recent reviews, we have renewed 11 of the Pillar 3 projects. Those are the transdisciplinary user question-led projects. We have carried on the 6 Indigenous community water research projects of Pillar 3 that were developed a few years ago, co-developed with Indigenous communities, and they are co-led with those communities, which is something new. And I hope it's not extraordinary in the future to see that as I'd like to see it as a normal way of doing business in science. And then we have 12 new transformative science projects, every topic such as climate projections, thawing permafrost, inequitable impacts of water insecurity, groundwater quality, waterborne diseases, hydroeconomics. So really wonderful science coming out of those bits. I'm going to call out one particular project, the eDNA project, which did a pivot during the pandemic. And so kudos to John Giese and Mark Sorvos and Marcus Brinkman and their teams in that they found that they could detect the SARS-CoV-2 in municipal wastewater. And of course, with the cessation of testing across the country, human testing, this is about the only quantitative information we have on COVID infections now. And it's absolutely crucial. But a lot of that technology was developed from Global Water Futures scientists using Global Water Futures funds. And we're immensely proud of the connections and the benefit and to society that they did. And I have to say that we never, ever envisioned this when we wrote the proposal for Global Water Futures. But this demonstrates the importance of having this capacity to permit a pivot like this with a well-resourced unit of brilliant scientists to address a topic of immense importance for society. We have many ways of mentoring and career development in communications and Global Water Futures. The most recently through this last winter, the Women in Water lecture series. Earlier in the year, the Distinguished Lecture Series, our Young Professionals group with chapters across the country, and the wrap up this year of the Create for Water Security program led by Sherry Westbrook that was strongly tied into Global Water Futures. In our communications, we have built up, and I'll discuss more about equity, diversity, inclusivity, about our efforts in that area, and as well as indigenization and co-creation of water research, something that we have pioneered through our partnerships with Indigenous communities across Canada. The EDI, equity, diversity, inclusion, is extremely important for Global Water Futures and particularly relevant for the study of water, because water is something that has had, it brings all people together. It has a tremendous importance in Indigenous cultures and communities to this day. And it's certainly an equity issue as well, as many cultures around the world. Women are the water keepers and the water knowledge holders. And so we wanted to see if we could move this forward and provide a good example in Global Water Futures of how we can change things with an EDI strategy. And so it's an intersectional approach developed by Dr. Andrea Rowe and Corinne Schuster-Wallace, looking at working together, global impact and partnerships, and then linking that across to people, education, training, operations, and indeed in practice. And the EDI report has been adopted by Global Water Futures, and you can find it on the website. It's a very good and important read. We also have conducted outreach through art, and going back to inspiration from the Renaissance, perhaps in Italy a few centuries ago, in other parts of the world at various times, they said, let's bring art and science back together and see if artists can help us translate and communicate the science outcomes, which are very complex, sometimes very disturbing, from Global Water Futures as we're addressing climate change, water shortages, floods, droughts, water quality episodes, but also the basic sustainability of our economy and society. And so we've done this through the Transitions Project with artist Gennady Ivanov, who's artist in residence, but also with many artists through the Virtual Water Gallery, which is led by Dr. Louise Arnau. And it is, in fact, having its gallery meeting later this month. And that has involved artists from across the country with a wide variety of perspectives. GWF provides great benefits to Canadians, we believe. National flood, drought, water quality predictions, foundation for federal, provincial water management strategies, floodplain mapping, risks associated with water-related disasters, national transboundary lake restorations, the foundations for irrigation, precision farming, beneficial management, water information for prosperity in industry and communities, and flexible, responsive outcomes for climate change and extreme event risk management. We've also, through the vast numbers of people, attracted and retained hundreds of young professionals and brought some of the best scientists in the world to Canada. We've had quite a year last year with water events across Canada. The extreme energy and water events that started in late June 2021 and moving through November, the floods in BC, but some of the most extensive droughts and fires in our history, glacier melt and retreat, in some cases accelerated tenfold, flooding in the north, droughts in the south, and then extraordinary flooding in BC, and the wildfires associated with this, the permafrost decline. This shows that water problems are not going away, and global water futures and the solutions we provide are more important than ever. Important news items that we need to say is Global Water Futures will extend to the end of August 2024 with no additional costs. So this is a no-cost extension from the Canada First Research Excellence Fund. Projects may extend after the end of 2023, but there is no new money. So we're managing your existing budgets. We passed our midterm review and have proposed improvements to our data management and modeling, technology development, user uptake, and human water systems enhancement aspects of global water futures. I mentioned this new project, Rayon, Lakes and Water Quality Research, with a number of universities in Ontario, and a focus group looking at the extreme energy and water episodes of 2021 that will have a component at this meeting. We have also applied to the Canada Foundation for Innovation for funds to keep our observatories and labs going to 2029, supporting our technical and data management core teams. We'll find out in June if that's moving forward. We have also started a legacy documentation effort, 50 narratives, including a hardcover book, short videos, narrative stories, a legative website. So there's something from Global Water Futures for the future for people to look back onto and use. And we've been providing scientific advice or the reasons for a Canada Water Agency and what it might do. And its launch is for this year, mentioned in the throne speech and federal budget. So wonderful the federal government's moving forward on that. Our next steps: completion of our laboratory, theoretical, fieldwork, and community-based research activities, our modeling, our visualization, and tool developments. Synthesis of our activities to bring it together into coherent messages around workshops, sectoral meetings, modeling applications, synthesis papers, special issues, books, and others. And continued and even enhanced engagement with partners, stakeholders, users, and communities as COVID permits more and more face-to-face meetings. We will extend many projects to permit catch-up from the COVID-19 impacts, and we look forward to enhancement of existing projects and core teams through co-funding arrangements that they can develop with outside groups. Reminder, virtual water galleries taking place starting the 21st of May, running through June. That's with CWRA. And next year, we're planning an in-person meeting to focus on our final results and synthesis, and that will be in Saskatoon, as is fitting for the end of the project. And the Global Water Futures Observatory project is under review, fingers crossed. So now we turn it over to our open science meeting, Knowledge to Action. Lots of things here, wonderful talks coming up, panel discussions, synthesis and joint activities, focusing on managing and governing water futures, water-related risk reduction, harnessing data and knowledge to improve water practice. I want to thank Corinne Schuster-Wallace and Chris DeBeer, who have been primary organizers in moving that forward, and we'll hand it over to you, Corinne. Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, John, and congratulations to all of those involved with supporting GWF activities and projects, because you're the reason that we're here today. So thank you ever so much. As John noted, our theme today is managing and governing water futures. So focused on innovations and also how knowledge can be used to change approaches that better respond to climate change and to the Sustainable Development Goals. We are just over time, but before we break, I'd like to remind you of our meeting code of conduct as we commit to productive and inclusive knowledge exchange and discussions. Please keep your microphone muted when not engaged in discussions, and remember that sessions will be recorded. You will also have had the opportunity to join an English or a French stream. So again, if you would prefer one or the other, please make sure that you click on the right stream as you enter the rooms. I look forward to reconvening with you in just over 5 minutes, so 9:45 Central, 11:45 Eastern. We will hear Troy Brockbank of Pattle Delamore Partners from New Zealand, and Colleen Sklar, who's Executive Director to the Winnipeg Metropolitan region here in Canada, and also Chair of the Global Water Futures User Advisory Panel. And they'll be talking about water governance and management and the innovations that they've been catalyzing in our first plenary session. So please stretch your legs, and we'll see you back in about 5-6 minutes. Take care. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our first plenary session of our 3-day meeting. I am thrilled to be able to introduce Troy Brockbank, who is a civil engineer, a water practitioner, Maori advisor leader with Pattle Delamore Partners in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and a board member of both the Water New Zealand and Aotearoa, New Zealand's new drinking water regulator. He was the recipient of the 2018 New Zealand Young Water Professional of the Year Award and the 2020 Engineering New Zealand President's Fulton Downer Silver Medal winner. So 15 years of professional experience across engineering consultancies, civil contractors, and suppliers in the water industry, and considers himself an intermediary, having the advantage of seeing aspects
Hi.
Welcome, and please say a few words of introduction, and then we can hand over to Troy.
Sure. Super excited to be here. What an interesting panel towards managing and governing water futures. I think from Six Nations, where I come from, we've been working towards trying to establish some inclusion in Canadian water policy, including the Canadian Water Agency, and have not yet really done as much as our in terms of finding a way to address our water crisis across for many First Nations. So this panel is incredibly important in terms of learning from our colleagues from around the world, from across Canada, who have done incredible work to make sure that Indigenous people have some presence within water governance and management. I was lucky enough this week at 2 a.m. To present at the International Water Association in Amplifying Indigenous Voices in Water Management. And it was incredibly important to hear how they're addressing similar concerns that we have, and perhaps even developing an Indigenous International Water Association. So I'm really looking forward and excited to meet new colleagues here that have been advocating for inclusion in Indigenous water. Our panelists today are well established. Colleen Sklar, Executive Director, serving as Winnipeg Metropolitan Region. Colleen's been working for the Center of Indigenous Environmental Resources and leading collaborative research in her area on water policy and governance. We're going to hear from her later. our guest, Troy, is working towards in New Zealand inclusion in Indigenous ways of knowing and being and the spiritual relationships with water. So I'm really excited to hear from Troy Brockbank, who's a civil engineer, water practitioner, and water advisory lead with partners in New Zealand and a board member of the Water New Zealand. I hope one day, Canada would include Indigenous people in the way that New Zealand has in water governance. So I'm looking towards hearing from you and inspired by the work you've been doing. So without further ado, please welcome Troy Brockbank. Yahweh.
Kia ora. I'll jump straight into it. Ko te tuatahi e mihi nui nui ki te atua no nā te timatanga te hakamutu ngā o ngā mea katoa. Ko te mea tuarua, e mihi ana kia rangi nui e tuiho nei me papa tōna ku e takoto nei. Mai ngā atua, ngā roimata e riri atu, e riri mai kia mātou te tangata. E mihi ana ki ngā whenua, te tūranga waiwai o ngā iwi Māori o Aotearoa, me te whenua o Treaty 6. E mihi ana ki ngā mate kua wihi atu ki te pō, haere atu rā. Piti hono tātai hono, rātou te hunga wairoa ki a rātou. Piti hono tātai hono, tātou te hunga hikoi ki a tātou. Me te honga ora kua tatu mai nei, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa. Who am I? Ko taumata māhui te maunga, ko taonga te wai te riki te ripo, ko tinana te waka, ko te raro te iwi, ko ngāti te ao te hapu, ko te raro te marae, ko puki potoa hau. This is my direct connection through one of my iwi, one of my tribes, to the places that I hold dear in my heart, to my ancestors. I'm acknowledging the whenua where I grew up. As you can see there in the photo, on the side there, in the red circle, is Tāngongi. Tāngongi is the waterway, ancestral waterway, the ancestral lake, or was once formerly a lake, I should say. And currently more of a wetland. It's an area that, for my people, we hold in high esteem. It's a place where we go to gather kai or food. It's a place where we learn to hunt. It's a place where kind of spiritually it soothes us. This area called Tāngongi. Unfortunately, in the 1930s, it was drained for farming. It was much bigger than that circle there. And I'm quite lucky to have grown up next to my ancestral waterways. This place that I hold so dear in my heart. Ko Troy Brockbank aho. My name is Troy Brockbank. I'm a person, I'm a human, I'm a son, I'm a husband, I'm a dad. I'm not a robot. I'm just normal. Yeah, as was saying before, I am a civil engineer. I am a water practitioner. I am a board member. And I put a quote at the end there that, again, holds dear to me around, I guess, my own beliefs, my cultural beliefs around water. Ko au te wai, ko te wai ko au. I am the water is me. And if you're wondering where I am right now, yes, I am in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Around 19 hours difference, I think, at the moment, from everyone out there. So you can imagine what godly time it is in the morning. But so glad to be here today, to be able to share my knowledge, my mātauranga, to be able to talk to you all today. Yeah, it's just such an honor and such a privilege. And I thank you very much. Now, when we look at the Indigenous views of Aotearoa, or I guess Māori, the Māori being the Indigenous native of New Zealand, we talk a lot about Te Ao Māori, and Te Ao Māori really is, in simplest term, the Māori world. It is this world view that we acknowledge our interconnectedness and interrelationship between each other, or between each living thing and each non-living thing. It is a world that is governed by genealogy, which really forms those connections. It comes down from the atua, or from the creator above, down through, I guess if you look at like a family tree, through this genealogical link, down to the people who are governing, being the rangatiratanga, down to kaitiaki, who are in charge of looking after and protecting this whenua, the land, the water, and why, for not just for now, for the present generations, but for the many generations to come. And it's up to us as kaimanaki to be able to share this wealth of resources, not so that we hold on to it, but really to share amongst ourselves and make sure we are hospitable towards others. And by doing so, we form this realm of kotahitanga, or togetherness, unity. Nā ngā atua e tuku iho mai tarangi ki te nuku o te whenua, ka puta te ira tangata i te pō, i te whaiau, i te aumarama, ti hei wā mauri ora. So it really does talk about, this responsibility from this world view, this responsibility from the ata above, coming down from the heavens to us on the land, and our responsibility and obligation to care for it for now and forever. And Te Ao Māori really is governed by genealogy. So we take the very first being Io Matua, or the supreme being, the creator, I guess you could look upon it as. From this, there was this void, which we acknowledge as the kore. So it's this void where nothing really happened. It was the starting of things. It was when we started to be deep in thought about what was to come. When it was in the void, it kind of transitioned into this realm called te pō, and te pō being the darkness. Te pō meaning dark night. But it was in this time when things were starting again. We're kind of transitioning from a lot of the thinking. Our ancestors were transforming from this void into something, and that something was the pō. So you can think about things that may have been created at that time, being the stars, the planets, starting to give life, things that perhaps live in the deep dark areas of the sea, for example. And it was after this realm of te pō where Te Ao Marama appeared, which is the world of light, which we believe is what we're living in right now, Te Ao Marama. And I'll show you an example, of a kōrero tuku iho, or kōrero pūrākau, that's been passed down through the many generations, which talks about Rangi Nui, our Sky Father, and Papa Tuanuku, our Earth Mother. So it was these two that were locked in an embrace when this period was called Te Pō. We had Rangi Nui, the Sky Father, on top, and you had Papa Tuanuku, the Earth Mother, below. And these two deities, we believe, were together, squished together, one on top of each other. So you can imagine it like that. And they had many, many children. It's said they've had over 70 different children, and these children make up the deities that look after the various domains in the environment. So one of these children, by the name of Tāne Mahuta, who is the deity of the forest, he's also the deity of life-giving water, also known as Tāne Te Waiora. He had enough of living in this place, and this cold, this damp, this dark place, sandwiched between his parents. So he said to his siblings, I'm going to push them apart. So he laid on his back, put his feet against his father, Rangi Nui, and pushed them apart. And when they separated, in came the light, what we knew as Te Ao Marama. But when these two deities, they separated, you can imagine when two loved ones are separated, they start to, they weep for each other. Not necessarily to mourn, but more to weep. because they're so in love with each other, and they can't feel each other's embrace anymore, and they're so separated apart that they started to weep for each other. And it is these tears, we believe, ngā roimatu, ngā atua, or the tears of Rangi and Papa, the tears from Ranganui, the rain that falls every day, the tears from Papa and Tuanuku, our Earth Mother. They are the springs that come out of the ground. And every morning we have what they call the mist or the fog. And that's the time when these two waters embrace each other, the tears touching each other. And this is just one kōrero tuku iho story that's passed down through generations and generations, that's kind of governed how we look at water in Aotearoa. It's not just a thing. It's not a waste product, it's a living thing. And it also comes from people, so it is quite personified. And there's the way we look at water in Aotearoa, at the moment, or especially from this Te Ao Māori view, is really this personification of water itself. Because we acknowledge water as, the life of all things. And I heard it on the call just before, from one of the presenters at the start. And there was actually quite a few that everyone was talking about water as life. And it is so true. Ko te wai te ora o ngā mea katoa. Without water, we wouldn't be here as people. And we know that we as people are also water. We're not. So basically, we're a walking potato, I guess, if you looked at it from a scientific perspective. We've made up with so much water inside our bodies. Ko hau te wai, ko te wai ko hau. I am the water. The water is me. And this really talks about, we're not above water. We're not below water. We're with water. We are water. We are one and the same. So it's really our obligation and our responsibility to look after water, because by looking after water, governing water, we're governing ourselves. So what is water from a Te Ao Māori perspective? Well, what is water from an engineering perspective? We look at it as three waters: storm water, wastewater, drinking water. We can expand that quite wider in the scientific fields that we've compartmentalized water in. So fresh water, seawater, marine water, groundwater, surface water. But really from a Te Ao Māori, we don't really look at water in these ways. Water, why is why? Water is water. So it's kind of the same lines as I understand most other indigenous, or some other indigenous cultures around the world view water as being one water. It's really what we call a taonga being a precious resource, something that is given to you, and that you must cherish and look after it. A big part of Te Ao Māori is really ki uta ki tai, and it's really a holistic concept, basically meaning towards the upper catchment and down to the sea, ki uta ki tai. So it really talks about, a catchment-wide approach. But we also quite look at mai te rangi ki te whenua, and I mentioned it earlier in my kōrero today, where it really completes this holistic sense. So we're not just looking at things from a 2D, from a map catchment perspective, but it's more on a 3D, 4D perspective, where we've got all the elements in play. And I guess this isn't really a new thing if you're looking at this from a engineering perspective, if you're looking at this from a water perspective, because we're taught quite early on, whatever our profession is at school around the water cycle. And again, it's really similar to this holistic view of ki uta ki tai mai te whenua ki te nuku o te whenua. So really around that mountains to sea, sky to sea approach. So you can see on the side there, I've just put in a representation of another way that Māori see this water cycle, and it's really this personification of different deities looking after water as it passes through, from the sky, from the clouds, from Ranginui, the Sky Father, down to Papatuanuku, the Earth Mother, and the different ways it can flow into, is it going to be wide Māori or fresh water, drinking water, unrestrained water? And then also, what happens if it's coming from industry where it's coming from unpolluted or polluted sources, I should say. So we have waikino, then we have waimate being this dead water that can take life, and how that needs to be filtered back through Papatuanuku to be able to be connected back, those tears from Ranginui down, filtered through Earth, through Papatuanuku itself, the mother who heals things before they can, go back up into the sky to Ranginui again. And we see this in the morning, again, like I said, in the fog and the evaporation, or even through transpiration as well, tuku wai and wairehu being the water vapor. But really, in the center of all this is around a need to look after water and its Māori, and Māori being that life force or that life essence, that life-sustaining capacity of water, that, without it, it will be nothing. It would cease to exist. So a way for us to cherish water, look after water, and protect it, again, for the future generations. And this is something that, when we look at kind of governance of water, there's no better example really than in Aotearoa than Te Awa Tupua, or the Whanganui River, the Wanganui River. And if this is the river in Aotearoa, New Zealand, which has been given legal entity, and one of the the ways that the local iwi, or one of the kōrero around the local iwi, when they were deciding what to do with their tupuna river, their ancestor river, was they always went back to two whakatauki. The first one really talked about ko au te awa, ko te awa ko au, I am the river is me. But also this one that's on the screen here, kawa ke kōrero mō te awa, kōrero ki te awa. Don't talk about the river, talk to the river. And they really took people down to the river to reconnect with the river, so they could, acknowledge it, and look at ways that they could protect it and manage it for the future generations ahead. But there's no better example in Aotearoa around this. We've turned a river into a legal entity. We turned it into a person, essentially, a river that can, act for itself, be the voice for itself. And I guess this is always used in Aotearoa as that, that stepping stone, or that goal, not really a stepping stone, but that goal of where we want to get to with all our waterways, especially for each iwi in Aotearoa. One of the measures that's guiding, the thinking in Aotearoa around this, or the change, I guess, has been Te Mana o Te Wai. And Te Mana o Te Wai is a holistic concept built on both Māori and non-Māori principles, and obligations to ensure that the first right of water is going back to water. So that the hierarchy of obligations in this framework, Te Mana o Te Wai, and this is part of this concept is in the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, but actually it's kind of become the standard across all water management in Aotearoa. But this obligations really talk about, first the health and well-being of water bodies and freshwater ecosystems goes to those water bodies. Secondly, the next obligation is around the health needs of people. So examples are such as drinking water, food harvesting, food growing. And the third one really looks at everything else, basically. It's a capture-all, really. But it really looks at the ability of people in communities to provide for their social, economic, and cultural well-being for now and also into the future. But this is kind of when we're looking at water management now, we're really going, right, on a project where we're working, we're no longer looking at compliance measures. We're not looking at we need to have a stormwater discharge, and this is what we're going to do. But now it's saying, wow, what is the water body that this stormwater is discharging into, and how can we make that the center of all our decisions to make sure the health of that waterway or that water body is around for the next generation? So it's a framework or concept that's really changed our thinking in Aotearoa. And it has these 6 principles: mana whakahaere, governance, kaitiakitanga and stewardship, manakitanga and care and respect. And if you take these 6 principles, you can see they're actually 3 sets of peers. One looking at it purely from an Indigenous worldview, and then the other from all New Zealander or a non-Indigenous view, but really aligned with the environmental management, sustainability, action. So if we take kaitiakitanga just as an example for today, it's an obligation of tāngata whenua, or the people of the land, to preserve, restore, enhance, and sustainably use fresh water for the benefit of for present and future generations. But if you have a look at the stewardship side, the obligation of all New Zealanders to manage fresh water in a way that ensures it sustains present and future generations. So essentially the same outcome, but actually just looking at it from a different lens, and the same with the other ones as well. So these principles are used quite a lot in Aotearoa, as well as this concept of te mana o te wai. So basically, this framework or this concept is really giving effect to te mana o te wai is really the biggest change, and the thing that we're really doing right now. Te mana o te wai has been around in Aotearoa not for a long time. It's been around since about 2014, but it's only now, probably in the last 2 years, that people are starting to really give effect to it, really buying into this concept, which is national policy, but really showing how they can give effect to it. And some of the big drivers in that have really been from change in legislation. But really, how do we give effect to te mana o te wai? What's really acknowledging water's at the center. It's really about water management is not really about managing water. It's really about managing us as people and our interactions, our relationships, and our connections with water. So if those connections or relationships are severed, we need to do something there. Giving effect to te mana o te wai also means that on projects now, regional councils must engage with tāngata whenua. They must engage with Indigenous people of the land here in Aotearoa. And they must be able to define what te mana o te wai means to them as well, within their rohe or within their localized area. And they must also engage with tāngata whenua to set long-term visions for their waterways, to set environmental outcomes, and to look at national objective frameworks, and attributes around their waterways as well, and make sure that they are achieving the goal of that. But it means we need to apply these hierarchy of obligations. And again, this is something that has been around a long time, but people are really invested in it in Aotearoa, and it's been a massive change. It's also enabled the application diversity, bringing in what we call mātauranga Māori, or Indigenous knowledge, into the projects that we have. And also, again, adopting this integrated approach, not just from that catchment level, but in this 3D, 4D layer, ki uta ki tai, mai te rangi ki te whenua. And this has really been shaping this concept. Te mana o te wai has really been shaping a current water reforms that are happening in Aotearoa, New Zealand. From the taumata Arawai being formed, which I am a board member of, but it's the national regulator, water regulator. And you can see how much Te Ao Māori has infused its way into governance and water governance in Aotearoa, because taumata Arawai doesn't have an English translation. It's just taumata Arawai, which really means the platform in which we focus on water. But in their legislation, they have to give effect to te mana o te wai to the extent that they can, that applies to their functions and duties. And this is a big change in our industry quite recently, since 2020, where legislation has been changed to make sure companies are giving effect to mana te wai, but also the profession is as well. And the same thing with the Water Services Act, which is the regulatory act which governs taumata arawai. I mean, again, in New Zealand, we're going through this current water reform where we're looking at changing from 67 water authorities to 4. So really bringing it down in a regional perspective. And they also have to give effect to mana te wai. And that's one of the main objectives of those reforms. And you can see that in the bottom here in these circles. The first one, giving effect to mana te wai. But also in the makeup of these companies or these entities, they're going to have a co-governance arrangement where the local authorities, which there's 67 of, are going to be joint or co-governance with mana whenua, the tāngata whenua, the local people, the local indigenous people. So really bringing them in and ensuring from the top down that we have a strong water industry with biculturalism, with views from a Māori and a non-Māori, or indigenous and a non-indigenous view. And as part of that, again, as you can see in the yellow there, around te mana o te wai statements, so how they're going to give effect to te mana o te wai, and the entity responding with a statement of response, and how they're going to achieve that. So again, exciting things ahead for us in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And I guess we're also looking at workforce development as well. So basically, we've got 4 strategic goals in our Ko Wai Tātou, or our water workforce development strategy in Aotearoa. And number 1 on that strategy list is respecting Māori interest and knowledge. And you can see in the box at the bottom there, some of the recommendations around building our understanding, or continuing to build our understanding of te mana o te wai. Understanding new opportunities for iwi hapu, for tribes and sub-tribes, and what our roles in the water industry are, and what are those pathways to get in there. And also providing that bridge for young Māori into existing water roles, and supporting iwi-led leadership initiatives as well, and especially around governance of water bodies and co-governance arrangements, and perhaps even more so around empowerment, enabling these pathways, these initiatives, and empowerment to do so as well. But this is my last slide. So sorry, I just noticed the time, so I've just been rushing through. But I hope you found value out of this kōrero today around, what we're doing in Aotearoa, New Zealand. There's so much more I could have said, but you're really restricted to 20 minutes and trying to jam pack as much information as we can. So I do hope you found this quite valuable. But this is one of the reasons I do this mahi, and a lot of others in Aotearoa do this mahi as well. Ka ora te wai, ka ora te whenua, ka ora ngā iwi. If the water is healthy, the land is healthy, the people are healthy. Kia ora. Thank you.
Wow. Niawe for that. I don't think it's any secret that the people around Turtle Island admire the work that you've done, and the Māori in general have done around water, and hope one day we can emulate something similar, and maybe get together where we can talk a little bit longer than 20 minutes. I know it's tough. Really exciting. Much gratitude. Fantastic. Thank you so much. As you know, we have another panelist today, and Canada or the US, North America is very different because we have hundreds and hundreds of diverse tribes, and getting, to work around these issues is not easy for anyone to do. So the work that Colleen Sklar is doing in working with multiple First Nations stakeholders and on Indigenous environmental resources and collaborative leadership initiatives is really admirable, as the Vice Chair of the Lake Manitoba Appeal Commission for the Province of Ontario, and the Chair of the Province of Manitoba's Expert Advisory Committee on Climate Change, and Chair of the Global Water Futures User Group, among many other things. So much gratitude for all of your commitment around the water management, governance, and our future, and the work that you're doing with First Nations. Trying to have inclusion is very difficult. It's complex in Canada. So I'm really looking forward with what you have to share with us today. Please welcome Colleen Sklar.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much, Dawn, for the lovely introduction. And I also wanted to thank Troy for his wonderful presentation and perspective on regionalism and working, and really found it fascinating. Thank you very much. My name is Colleen Sklar, and I'm joining you from Treaty 1 territory today, the traditional territory of the Cree, the Dakota, Dene, Ojibwe, Oji-Cree, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. I'm really excited to share with you a little bit about our thoughts here at the Winnipeg Metro on climate change, what we're seeing here with regards to water issues, and some of the projects we're working on, very small scale, but projects that might offer a little bit of insight to protect fresh water in the face of a changing climate. So I don't think I have to tell anybody here that over the past several decades, society has experienced more change than at any time in human history. We've seen change in scope, in velocity, and this change just keeps coming, and it isn't slowing down. We see political change, technological change, social change, and climate change. We see this change in temperature readings and ocean level rises and glaciers melting and changes in water quality across Canada and the world. And we know communities are experiencing the consequences of climate change in the form of more frequent and intense storms, flooding, droughts, and wildfires. In April and May this year in Manitoba, we experienced 4 Colorado lows in as many weeks with extreme rain and snow, and this is just not normal. It caused incredible widespread flooding, loss, and heartache that is still happening today. Right now in Winnipeg, we have over 2,500 people from Peguis First Nation that are displaced, living in hotels, waiting to return, and they've lost their homes, their belongings, and they've been separated from their communities. Climate change is a very, very real and palpable cost in a human cost in terms of lives lost and permanently altered. I've witnessed firsthand as the co-chair from the Manitoba Flood Appeal Commission in 2011, the 1 in 300-year flood event. What I saw was completely devastating. I saw the lines of loss etched across the faces of farmers, of ranchers, of cottagers, of business owners, of communities, Indigenous communities, of towns and cities, as they all struggled to come to terms with their unimaginable loss and recover little bits of their lives. Along with an emotional toll, climate change has hard financial costs, the immense costs of cleanup and rebuilding after natural disasters. And according to the Munich Reassurance Company last year, the global losses from natural disasters hit $355 billion. And the UN Environment Program estimates that the global cost of climate change is expected to grow to $280 to $500 billion per year by 2050. These costs are just staggering. And I think it's fair to say climate change affects us all. It's impacting our social, environmental, economic, political disciplines and jurisdictions. It's causing economic instability, market volatility, the kind of instability that sees the highest inflation rates in decades. It's a disruptor to world order. Droughts, water shortages, crop failures, and disasters are destabilizing governance and fanning the flames of conflict. Here in Manitoba, farmers are still waiting to see if they're going to get their crops on the fields this year with the extreme water we have laying around. This leads to more aggressive style of politics and polarization, in which governing parties and opposition parties are treating each other like enemies instead of important parts of a system with checks and balances. We see federal governments and provincial governments less willing than ever to work together to solve problems, even problems as important as climate change. We've seen the global pandemic bring unimaginable loss to communities and individual families like mine, who will never be the same again. And we've seen neighbor turn against neighbor in the so-called freedom protests that occupied the seat of government unlawfully, spewing division and vitriol across our nation's capital. And we've seen uninformed, outdated planning practices and NIMBYism manufacture housing shortages, limit new climate resilient and affordable homes and communities across Canada. And we've seen the same outdated siloed planning practices that are disconnected from science and data, putting us all at risk. Local governments, municipalities are on the front lines, not only as first responders,
but they own, operate, and maintain 70% of all community infrastructure. They hold the pen in resiliency planning practices, and they hold the blueprint for investment strategies for mitigating infrastructure. These same municipalities and local governments struggle with capacity and resources. They lack the data needed to inform action and to what is necessary for today, never mind plan for a future more punctuated by frequent and catastrophic events. We've seen a lot of lip service, but not a lot of action towards true and meaningful reconciliation with Indigenous governments and communities, and dozens of Indigenous communities without clean, safe water to drink today, something that tens of millions of Canadians take for granted every day as we turn on our taps. Along with this lip service, we see indifference of municipalities acting as if they have no requirement to support services and share infrastructure across community lines. Today, there are very few collaborations that would make us all stronger. This short-sightedness does not serve anyone well today and will leave us even more vulnerable as we navigate a future that significantly diverges from the status quo. So I guess you could say that these are all examples of either direct effects or a situation made much worse by our climate change implications. Social scientists, planners, and scientists have called climate change a wicked problem, an immense, dangerous, existential problem. And wicked problems are intertwined and tangled across systems, disciplines, and jurisdictions. And they look different depending on who is describing them, who is looking at them. But when we look at climate change as one big, disastrous, dangerous problem, it quickly becomes overwhelming and limits our confidence to respond. And we find reasons not to act. It's too big, it's too late, we're too flat, we're too cold, we're too hot, it's not real, it's always been this way. It's beyond our capabilities, it's beyond our technology, it's better left to science. Oh, maybe the engineers should handle that. I think somebody else has that covered. It's too overwhelming. Well, the answer to all of this is no, it's not. We must find a way to shift our thinking, to move from the twos, the denial, the defeatism, to passing the buck, and we have to inspire action. I think it's only logical, strictly from a completely very, very non-scientific background, that maybe Newton's third law of motion may offer something to consider. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So for every wicked problem, there must be a wicked solution, and that can be acted on with equal force. That's a big solution to a big problem. Well, now finding that solution. Well, years ago, Archbishop Desmond Tutu talked about the right approach to solve a big problem. He said, there's only one way to eat an elephant, a bite at a time. One bite at a time. He didn't say who could be part of the elephant eating. He didn't say how you should take a bite. And he didn't specify the exact velocity of each chew. He simply said one bite at a time. Archbishop Tutu, of course, was talking about apartheid. But maybe if we apply the same approach to solving the wicked problem of climate change, breaking it down in pieces, taking our piece and getting moving, it may be advice we should consider. You're probably thinking, the clock is ticking, we have no time for eating elephants. But perhaps now is the time to do exactly that. The global pandemic has demonstrated that the world and all who occupy it can act in unison at the speed that is unfathomable when we're challenged to do so. In months, we changed the way we worked. We moved entire governments and businesses online. We completely changed our supply chain. And we collaborated across governments, business, and civil society to develop vaccines in record time. So we can move with speed when we need to. So also using Archbishop Tutu's advice to tackle the problem in pieces. And from what I've seen in my work as a conflict resolution practitioner and policy innovator, we may have something to build on. In my work at the Metro region, we are using a three-step process to dig into projects to inspire cultural and systemic change that can lead to protection of freshwater resources across Canada. Step one, communication matters. Create the right messaging and the right tools. We must build understanding, competency, and capacity broadly. And this messaging has to be based on science and data, but presented in a way that is relevant and used to support action and decision-making. Without this, the science just doesn't matter. So here's an example of what I'm talking about. At the Winnipeg Metro region, we are translating the best science and data from global water futures to build a regional planning specific resiliency tool for municipalities and First Nations in the Treaty 1 territory, so that they can have access to it in a way that local leaders, communities, planners, and developers have access to consistent data served up in a way that they can trust and easily digest. This tool is being developed in partnership with business and industry with strategic engineering out of Winnipeg. We're using gaming software and visualizations, and it is very user-friendly. We've developed a digital literacy program that accompanies this data to ensure all who need access to the tool, all that make decisions based on this information, have the information they need, how they need it, and when they need it. These tools help us build the understanding of water and what we need to do to manage and protect it. We're also taking a true regional approach that knows no boundaries to keeping up with our commitment to reconciliation. This work is being guided by Indigenous governments and advisors, and who are ensuring our data sets and inventories for planning and development include natural land and water inventories, species at risk, and identification of important wetlands and special habitats. Ensuring that these projects are informed by traditional Indigenous knowledge is integral to the process and not an afterthought. We are trying to ensure reconciliation is a cornerstone of our approach, and we are tackling this solution one bite at a time. Step 2, teamwork counts. Fighting a wicked adversary is not a solo sport. We are taking an all hands on deck approach where everybody contributes their skills and experience to the team. Everyone's work and knowledge system, Western and Indigenous, are valued and brought to bear in the problem. Yes, it may take a little longer as teams are harder to manage, but with teams you can go much faster and much farther. Along with the 18 municipalities in the Winnipeg Metropolitan region, we have joined with our partners at the Southern Chiefs Organization and the Centre for Indigenous Environmental Resources, or CEAR. And the region has taken part in a structured reconciliation process, the Collaborative Leadership Initiative, the first of its kind in Canada. This image shows the mayors and the chiefs after signing the MOU for 5 years of agreements to work together. CEAR brought together 28 Indigenous municipal and local leaders together. They signed an MOU to tackle climate challenges and water challenges after having no formal ways to work together or agreements in 150 years since the signing of Treaty 1 at Lower Fort Garry in Manitoba. This group has now forged new relationships that allow them to be part of Wicked Solutions as a large group or one-on-one. And today they are tackling planning issues, servicing challenges, creating inventories of natural areas, and working on a biomass heating pilot project. Municipal and Indigenous governments are very different levels of government, working together where they can, one solution at a time. Third step is to build momentum, and more will jump on board. We need to facilitate and inspire action across all jurisdictions by identifying what each person can do and asking them to do it. We must seed the opportunity to implement solutions now to instill hope through action. To do this, we need all voices at the table. Here at the Metro, we're doing this through a long-term collaborative land use plan. To build this plan, we brought together partners and contributors from government, business, industry, and the public, and we have over 1,000 contributions to this project. Our plan now contains actions to tackle the wicked problems in the short term and over the long term, from a variety of angles. It has put best practice forward from across Canada and the globe. To lead the plan, we identified 4 policy lenses to review all policy through. They are to build and plan for climate resilience, to protect, restore, and enhance water, land, and natural resources. Reconciliation has to be at the forefront, and economic and technological transformation is the fourth. So Plan 2050 is a collaborative, evolving work in progress. It allows us to try new practices and processes. It supports a big team approach with clear direction for all, and it strategically inspires an all-hands-on-deck approach. Having clear direction and unsiloing our efforts is the first step to strategically align skills and resources so we can make real investments in the future. The costs of climate change are no match for individual budgets. We must pool our resources, our information, our capacity, and our expertise. These are just a few examples of what we're doing here at the Winnipeg Metro region. But one thing I've learned is we can't do any of this without science and data and research. And science and data and research can't do any of this without all of us. So we need to open up the lines of communication and transparently discuss what we need. We need to provide clear direction and action so everyone can pick up their pieces. It's much easier to eat an elephant when you invite lots of folks to the table. Wicked problems require wicked solutions, big, audacious, messy, wicked solutions. We need to throw everything we have at it, tackling different parts of the fight simultaneously with a variety of methods, ideas, technologies, and partners. In other words, tackling this wicked problem isn't one big fight. It's thousands of small fights fought by millions of people at the local and regional level across the globe. And each fight must be documented, discussed, measured, and celebrated, whether it's successful or not. One bite at a time, one fight at a time. There's no time for half measures, no time to squander resources or our chances, and there's no rightful contender for this fight. Winning this fight starts with each and every one of us. We need to make the science matter. We must use it and use it wisely. That is how we will win this fight. That is how we will deliver a better future and a cleaner future and a safer future for our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Thank you very much, and I hope some of my examples might spur some conversation. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Again, such an enormous undertaking both of you are working on, and I do very little here as a global water futures researcher with Six Nations Haudenosaunee. So I know what you're up against, and I have much admiration for your work. I know that we're going to be getting questions in, but there's a few things I thought we would start off to discuss, both of the work that you're doing and hopefully, obviously a little bit biased on ways in which we can find common ground, as you put it. What do you think the most valuable priority that people should be working on and thinking of, like if we are overwhelmed, what is the one thing that we need to be working on to establish a cohesive strategy here in Canada, but also with Troy in mind, modeling after what the Maori are doing? I guess I'm asking you, Colleen, is looking at what he's doing, how does it compare to what Canada has been non-strategically undertaking? What do you think we can do? I think that's what people want to know.
Well, sure, I'll jump in, but I'll defer to Troy for his knowledge and wisdom. But I have to say how impressed I am to see this type of thinking and bringing all partners to the table and in a real formal way through the decision-making process. And I think that's what we're lacking here. We have a lot of tools and a lot of people working on the issues, but we're not bringing it together like I think Troy's example demonstrates. And I think if we could bring it together and create a structured, strategic process, we may be able to really move things forward a lot faster. And Troy, I might defer to you to follow up on that.
Yeah, well, I guess it's not an easy task. I guess it's taken many years for Aotearoa New Zealand to get to this stage. Things I missed out in my presentation. We were, deprived for a long time. We were colonized. We signed the treaty in 1840. And then soon after that, there was many different legislation put through in the new government that, you know, look to destroy water, destroy Indigenous views, knowledge. So it's taken us a long time to get to where we are today. So it's not easy task. You know, my advice is, an analogy that someone told me once is you got to play it like an accordion. You got to hit it from the top. You got to hit it from the bottom. And you got to play music in the middle somehow. But like an accordion, you can't just push it. You need to be able to give and take. So to me, that's really, you know, a big part of it is that reciprocity, and looking at, you know, what can Indigenous knowledge provide to perhaps Western science and vice versa. And that's a way that we can come to the table, because after you do come together, you start to see things the same in terms of the outcomes are the same. Different lenses, of course, but the outcomes are definitely the same or similar, I should say.
Dawn, just to follow up, we learned with the Collaborative Leadership Initiative that we worked on with SEER and the 28 leaders that it really set the table for having those types of conversations. And there was no formal way to even talk about it before we started this. And it was surprising to me that it hadn't happened in 150 years. So we've got a lot of work to do, and we got to get busy at doing it. And I love your recording analogy. I'm going to use that one.
I quite liked your talk before, actually, if I can just jump in. When you mentioned about Desmond Tutu, when my grandfather passed away, I looked through his photo albums, and there was Desmond Tutu at his dining room table having dinner with him. They weren't eating elephant, but they were there together.
Thank you. I just want to announce to those listening in to please send in your questions under the comment, and I'll take them. So not sure that they're able to see that they can put in their questions. But I'm also very interested in strategic ways that we can engage. I think you nailed it, Troy, when you're talking about the way in which we develop our ideas around. It's culturally, spiritually informed. And that seems to be the biggest barrier in some ways with trying to establish how we relate to water, that, you know, we're dependent. That is the mother. That is, we're the children, and we're not in a hierarchy where we're at the top. And that paradigm is so entrenched in at least North American culture, that humans are the center of the universe and everything revolves around them, and no thoughts to sustainability, or what we all know as scientists is a looming crisis that we're going to be facing in water security. If we have water insecurity now, in the last 100 years, as you mentioned, across Canada, I can't even imagine what Indigenous communities are going to be facing in the next 50 to 100 years as we look at climate change analysis. So how did you engage with like mainstreams, New Zealanders to advance the Maori model, which we're not even close to that in Canada, but what steps, what pathways did you take to do that?
Again, I think most of it has come from legislation, to be honest. So we do have a treaty in Aotearoa between the Māori and the Crown. And that is, everything kind of looks towards that. And we have what they call treaty partnerships, again, between different iwi and the Crown. And it's through those relationships that kind of they filter down. Again, not all iwi in New Zealand have settled with the government in terms of the treaty. But that's one thing, is through and then that's kind of filtered down to, you know, the national policy statement having te mano te wai. And there is that concept. There's a big language revitalization, which has helped quite a bit and kind of brought te reo Māori, or the Māori language, to the forefront. You have a lot of enthusiastic practitioners like myself, you know, constantly advocating for change in our industry. But then we have a lot of professionals and companies that, you know, want to do the right thing, you know, and they've really taken up the challenge and incorporating, you know, Māori culture and integrating te ao Māori, the Māori worldview, into their processes, and just to make it business as usual within their workplaces. So it's kind of a numerous different things, that have helped along this way. But, leadership has changed as well. Regionally, people have seen the good, what can be achieved when you do this as well. So lots of case examples, case studies. So it's a lot of things.
Thank you for that. We actually have a question, and we have about a minute to answer it. This is from Ash Duffy, Canada for Troy, and working to decolonize, which I think you've somewhat addressed. Working to decolonize water governance here in Canada. We are learning from New Zealand. Do you have any advice for us? So just echoing what we've already essentially said.
Yeah, stay true to the Indigenous voice. It's the truth. It's so puna, and puna being truth, I guess. That'll be the main thing, to be honest. Look for ways to change people's perspectives and be the transformational change. If it doesn't work one way, try again. Easier said than done, but that's what we're doing in Aotearoa.
Well, I want to thank you both. We have time for a break, and then I'm encouraging you to join with the other link. I know it's a little complicated. We're all struggling to find the links, but please, for those that are listening to this, take your break and then join the panel with Global Water Futures. And just much gratitude to both of you for the work that you're doing. I know it sometimes seems like it's an elephant, as you mentioned, and I don't think people are really aware of the mountain that we are really trying to climb, and the time is not on our side. So I think all of us appreciate anybody and everybody working to advance Indigenous inclusion and water management. I think we should be at the forefront. As they are in New Zealand. And I think we need to work with our allies. And to answer the question from Duffy, it's who you vote for, whether or not these things become reality and change. And without, your voice as your government to reach out and do more and do better, because the water, we all rely on it, as all of you have pointed out. So I want to thank you for a great panel. We're going to have a break, and hopefully we will have an International Indigenous Water Alliance, because we really need to have these conversations, and we need time together to really think through how to solve these problems, and we need everybody there, but with centrality of the Indigenous voice, because we've managed our environment incredibly well, as the Intergovernmental Panel pointed out. The data, as you mentioned, is in, and Indigenous people worldwide have done more and better for their water and environment than any other group or nation on the planet. So with that evidence, if you want people to listen to the science, I encourage you to take note of the biggest study on the biodiversity and biology of the planet, and who is saving it and who is managing it the best are Indigenous people. So I think we need to be at the forefront, and I thank GWF for continual advocacy to make that happen, and people such as yourself, Colleen, working really hard to bring all these issues to the forefront. Much gratitude, Nyawe, Danitu, thank you all for being with us. Take care.
Thank you.
Hope to see you soon. Yeah.
Thank you, Troy.
Bye.